Across centuries, symbols whispered from stone temples, gilded manuscripts, and shadowed halls. They were not mere myths. They were codes, patterns, rituals of power. Today, they are guarded in boardrooms and billionaire retreats. Some call it conspiracy, others anthropology. What is clear? The Hermetic wealth codes shape our world. Let us begin carefully. This is not sensationalism. This is history, anthropology, and philosophy woven into the economics of power. My goal is not to frighten you with wild claims, but to open a lens on what has been documented, studied, and symbolically transmitted for millennia. You may have heard whispers of dark rituals, of billionaires performing ceremonies behind closed doors, of societies where oaths are sworn, and wealth flows mysteriously toward the same hands. But strip away the lurid imagery, and what we find is something more subtle, more powerful. Ritualized systems of meaning, systems of secrecy, systems of wealth. We will walk through these systems step by step. We will ask, what are Hermetic wealth codes, and why do elites still guard them? How did secrecy itself become a tool of wealth creation? And what does ritual mean when we peel back fear and look with sober eyes? You'll hear of historical examples, how Renaissance patrons used hidden symbolism to consolidate cultural capital, how merchant guilds turned initiation rites into economic monopolies, how modern billionaires attend retreats that, to the outsider, look more like ritual theater than business meetings. The line between myth and mechanism is thin. My task is to show you both. Sources for this exploration are public. Archives, translated texts, economic histories, anthropology. Nothing here comes from leaks or tapped conversations. Instead, we trace the visible fingerprints left by those who encoded their knowledge in symbols, ceremonies, and secrecy. By the end, you will see how power moves not just through money, but through meaning. And you will have tools, ethical, transparent, empowering, to step out of shadow and into authorship of your own wealth. Take a breath. Lean in. Let us step into the vault of history. To understand the term, let's return to the Hermetic tradition. The Hermetic writings, texts like the Corpus Hermeticum, framed reality as governed by principles. 7 were most often taught. Mentalism, all is mind. Correspondence, as above, so below. Vibration, nothing rests, everything moves. Polarity, opposites reveal unity. Rhythm, cycles govern all things. Cause and effect, nothing escapes law. Gender, creation requires polarity. Now pause, these are not spells, they are frameworks. When applied to wealth, they function less as metaphysics and more as operating instructions. For example, mentalism, or let's say narrative control. Those who shape the collective story shape where money flows. Think of advertising empires, political campaigns, or media conglomerates. Vibration is timing and signaling. Just as markets pulse with cycles, elites who sense rhythm act before the crowd. Correspondence means structural mirroring. Align your enterprise with state power, and your risk shrinks while your reward multiplies. This is what I call a wealth code, a Hermetic principle reimagined as a tool for economic and social dominance. And here lies the genius. By encoding these truths in ritual, in symbol, in language that only the initiated understood, they preserved not only secrecy, but advantage. In Renaissance Italy, merchant families embedded Hermetic imagery in chapels and art they commissioned. Why? Not for beauty alone. Symbolism was capital. It signaled allegiance, wisdom, and trustworthiness to those within the circle. The wealth codes were never about coins alone. They were about trust, timing, networks, perception, and they still are. History is full of vaults, mystery schools in Egypt, Pythagorean brotherhoods in Greece, alchemical guilds in medieval Europe, each guarded knowledge through layered secrecy. Mechanisms included coded language. Alchemists wrote of turning lead into gold, but the true work was inner transformation and economic metaphor. Initiation rites. Trust was tested through ordeal, oaths, and ritual theater. Control of archives, libraries, and manuscripts were often locked away, accessible only to patrons or priests. Patronage systems. Wealthy backers controlled who learned, published, or spoke. Secrecy was practical. Knowledge of navigation routes meant monopoly on trade. Knowledge of printing presses meant control of narrative. Knowledge of finance meant leverage over kings. The pattern is clear. Secrecy preserved competitive advantage, and advantage produced wealth. When you hear of secret societies, think less of cloaked figures chanting in basements and more of practical monopolies of trust, knowledge, and narrative. The phrase dark ritual seduces imagination. But let us clarify. A ritual is structured symbolic action. Across cultures, it condenses meaning, aligns intention, and forges trust. When a guild initiates a member through an oath, that ritual is economic. It binds loyalty. When elites gather in exclusive halls and enact symbolic plays, the ritual communicates status and identity. When billionaires retreat into forests or estates to attend ceremonies, the function is not sorcery. It is vetting, bonding, signaling. Anthropologists note that rituals concentrate intent, coordinate groups, signal membership, build trust under uncertainty. For wealth creation, these are priceless. Imagine an exclusive conference where billionaires chant or perform symbolic gestures. From outside, it looks bizarre. From inside, it is reassurance. I belong, I am trusted, I share this language. Symbols matter. A pyramid, an eye, a circle of fire. These are not random. They are anchors of collective imagination. They bridge past and present. They remind participants that they are heirs of a lineage, not mere individuals. To call this dark is to recognize that it is hidden, shadowed, exclusive. It does not necessarily mean evil, but secrecy itself casts a shadow. Knowledge is leverage. Throughout history, wealth flowed not simply from labor, but from privileged frameworks. Mechanisms included social capital. Who you knew was more powerful than what you produced. Informational arbitrage. Knowing before others where ships would land or markets would turn. Institutional influence. Writing the rules through patronage or lobbying. Regulatory capture. Shaping the gatekeepers themselves. Here are some case studies. Merchant guilds that controlled spice routes guarded maps as treasures more valuable than gold. Early printers, funded by elites, decided which texts survived and which vanished. Modern equivalents, venture capital circles, invitation-only boards, private policy dinners, all where decisions precede public knowledge. The lesson: secrecy is not superstition. It is structural advantage. The phrase itself, dark ritual billionaires, carries mythic weight. On one hand, it evokes lurid tales, cloaked figures, blood oaths, hidden sacrifices. Pop culture feeds this imagery, from Hollywood films to conspiracy forums. But strip away exaggeration, and what remains? Mechanism. Rituals of membership, of trust, of secrecy, are the machinery of exclusive networks. The myths exaggerate, but the mechanisms are real. Examples: private clubs where symbols and ceremonies mark entry, elite retreats where allegorical plays or symbolic fires create belonging, closed conferences where rules of secrecy are themselves ritualized. The economic payoff: trust among the powerful. Deals are struck not only on spreadsheets, but in the rituals of shared secrecy. Psychology explains why. Status signaling. Rituals prove seriousness. Identity fusion. Rituals bond individuals into one body, reciprocity. Secrets shared create obligations. From outside, the line blurs between myth and mechanism. To some, it looks like occultism. To others, it is simply the theater of power. Let's take the ancient Hermetic principles and see how they quietly echo in the way power operates today. These are not dusty philosophies locked in temples. They are living mechanics, re-engineered by those who understand influence, wealth, and timing. The first law is mentalism. All is mind. For the elite, this translates into narrative control. Whoever shapes the story shapes the flow of money. Think of it. Entire empires rise or fall based not on facts, but on the story told about them. Next is vibration. The truth that everything moves, everything resonates. Powerful players use this as cadence. The timing of an announcement, the rhythm of a brand campaign, the carefully chosen pause in a speech that makes headlines the next day. It's not random, it's vibration engineered. Correspondence, as above, so below. Elites use this as institutional mirroring. When a corporation aligns with government priorities, subsidies, and protection flow. When philanthropy mirrors public sentiment, reputation grows untouchable. As above, so below. Polarity. Every force has its opposite. Some use this to fund both sides of the game, sponsor the debate, and no matter who wins, you hold influence. Rhythm. Everything cycles. Markets rise, markets fall. Those who read the rhythm act not with panic, but precision. Buying when others flee, selling when others swarm. They appear prophetic. In truth, they are simply rhythmic. Cause and effect. Nothing escapes law. Lobbying, legislation, regulation. When you engineer the cause, you do not wait for the effect. You design it. And finally, gender. Not in the narrow sense, but as the creative union of opposites. Innovation is born when two polar forces fuse. Finance meets technology. Politics meets philanthropy. Vision meets execution. This fusion creates worlds. So understand this. The Hermetic laws were never discarded. They were reimagined into operating principles for wealth, for influence, for the choreography of power. And while some guard them in secrecy, you now see them in plain sight. Let's pause and ask a critical question. What can actually be proven? Not rumor, not speculation, evidence, records, archives. The beauty and the danger of history is that so much is hiding in plain sight. The Hermetic texts themselves, the Corpus Hermeticum, the Kabbalion, they're not locked in secret vaults anymore. They're digitized in public domain. Anyone can read them. Few truly study them. University archives hold manuscripts on alchemy, on patronage, on the esoteric foundations of Renaissance finance. Not banned, not erased, but buried under academic language that filters out the curious seeker. Economic history shows us how merchant guilds controlled trade routes, using symbols and codes as trust signals. You can see this in the letters, contracts, and seals, preserved in libraries. No mystery, only hidden in the footnotes of history. Declassified documents add another layer. Government records on lobbying, court transcripts of monopoly trials, white papers revealing how regulation was shaped behind closed doors. These are the modern grimoires of power, not whispered in candlelit rooms, but filed in plain folders. And here lies the paradox. The greatest secrets are not invisible. They are ignored, overlooked, dismissed as too dense, too boring, too academic. If you want to verify, begin here. The Corpus Hermeticum translations, economic history journals, merchant guild archives in European libraries, lobbying registries and policy documents online. And know this: the elite rely not on keeping knowledge physically hidden, but on your assumption that it's not worth the effort to dig. The map is public. The ink is dry. The question is whether you'll read between the lines. Secrecy has always walked hand in hand with power. When knowledge is guarded, it creates advantage for the few against the many. And while history tells us that secrecy can preserve wisdom, it also shows us how easily it can turn into control. The Hermetic codes were meant for self-mastery, for inner transformation, but in the hands of elites, secrecy often became a weapon to entrench hierarchies. Guilds, courts, and councils decided who was initiated and who remained in the dark. The result? An economy of knowledge where access itself was currency. We face the same dilemma today. Privacy is natural, even necessary in certain domains. But when secrecy masks systemic capture, when it blocks transparency in governance, finance, or education, it no longer protects wisdom. It protects inequality. So we're left with a moral tension. Hidden knowledge can refine the individual, but hoarded knowledge can enslave the collective. The question, then, is how we as a society choose to balance openness and protection. Some argue for total transparency. Others argue for gatekeeping in the name of responsibility. Perhaps the wiser path lies between, not in discarding the Hermetic principle of veiling truth, but in updating it for our time. Protect what empowers, share what liberates. That is the ethical frontier. And it is not just a question for the so-called elite. It is a question for every one of us who studies, who learns, who holds even a fragment of hidden wisdom. So what do we do with all this? It's one thing to trace patterns of secrecy through history. It's another to turn that awareness into practice, into tools you can use to build your own life, your own sovereignty. The first step is education. Dive into the texts yourself. The Corpus Hermeticum, the Kybalion, the journals of economic history. These are not easy reads, but difficulty is what sharpens the mind. The second step is network. Not shadowy circles of secrecy, but circles of trust, integrity, and aligned vision. Build relationships with people who value growth, not manipulation. Wealth, in its deepest sense, is social before it is financial. Third, discipline in your signals. Your reputation is currency. The more consistent you are in action and word, the more your name itself becomes capital. In ancient guilds, a man's seal was his fortune. Today, it is your character. And finally, practice inner mastery. Clarity rituals, meditation, journaling. Speaking your goals aloud each morning. The elites have always known that energy precedes form. If you master your own vibration, you carry the Hermetic wealth code openly, not in secrecy, but in practice. These steps are not glamorous. They are not hidden in vaults, but they are the real rituals of empowerment. Simple, ethical, replicable. We've journeyed from the Hermetic temples of Alexandria, through Renaissance courts, through the shadowed halls of modern boardrooms, and what emerges is a paradox. The so-called dark rituals of billionaires are not as otherworldly as they seem. They are patterns of psychology, of group cohesion, of knowledge guarded and leveraged. The myths exaggerate, but they point to something real. Power thrives on ritual. Secrecy amplifies influence. Knowledge, when coded and concealed, can move empires. But here is the forgotten truth. The Hermetic wealth codes were never meant to remain locked away. They are laws of mind and energy, available to all who study, reflect, and apply. The difference is not in access, it is in discipline. So as you step away from this journey, remember, power loves the shadow, but truth multiplies in the light. Study the codes, understand the mechanisms, and choose to build wealth that does not need secrecy to survive. Before you go, I invite you into a ritual of your own. In the comments, write a simple mantra. I choose knowledge in the light. It's a way of sealing the lesson into your own energy field, of declaring that you will use these insights not for secrecy, but for sovereignty. And if you want more journeys like this, where history, metaphysics, and power meet, subscribe and ring the bell. Our next chapter begins soon.